Is set to chart a dramatic new path in education. Early this morning, the House approved a measure the same chamber repeatedly stood against. Just 2 years ago, it passed legislation to let Texas families spend taxpayer dollars to send their children to private schools.
Now, the House and the Senate will still need to iron out some of the changes made to the proposal. So let's break down what lies ahead before it looks like the governor will sign it into law. This afternoon, we are joined by two former Texas lawmakers. Dennis Bonnen is a former House Speaker who represented Southeast Texas, while Mark Strama previously served as a Democratic representative for the Austin area. Dennis and Mark, welcome back to you both.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so Mark, I want to start with you because given the fact that this all passed overnight after a lengthy debate, share your reaction and your thoughts about this because it is a pretty momentous moment for the state.
Well, we've talked about it a lot all session. We've said consistently it's likely to pass. What happened, you know, the voucher policy is a controversial, it's like almost a religious opposition to it from the pro-public school community. I personally don't see it that way. I think as a matter of policy, it doesn't move the needle a whole lot in either direction. I am very rare in that opinion. What I hate about it actually is two things. One, it distracts us from paying more attention to the things that do move the needle in public education. And two, I hate the politics and the process by which this became the most important issue in the state. Because this became an issue. I mean, we talked about a Texas polling project, the UT polling groups poll on this issue. And among Republicans, after so much money has been spent on it, after it became such a litmus test issue in the Republican primaries, among Republicans, when you ask them about this issue, you know, maybe half of them are like, yeah, I'm for vouchers. But I read another poll by that same group where when they asked the open-ended question, what's important to you about public education? Even among Republican voters, vouchers doesn't get 10%. So I just think this is an example of how our political system is broken, that big money and the concentration of power in political primaries instead of in general elections has caused this issue that I don't think is that big a deal to become the most important issue in the state and purged a bunch of Republicans in the primaries last cycle.
Yeah, and Dennis, what are your thoughts about this?
I think I tend to agree with Mark to some extent, but not fully. You know, yesterday a slight comment was made about maybe a neurosurgeon being a product of public schools. And so I'll use that example. My oldest brother is the chair of appropriations, is a practicing neurosurgeon. I was Speaker of the House. I'm dyslexic. Well, guess what? He's a product of Angleton High School Public Schools. I'm a product of Angleton High School Public Schools. But along that journey, my parents took me to Red Reading Center in Bel Air, Texas, and inside of Houston, because they catered to dyslexic children in our learning needs. I then went to AP Boydell Elementary School in Lake Jackson, where they had the alphabetic phonics program where they pulled me out every day for that class with other dyslexic students. So the point is, why should any family be trapped in a situation that is not the best for their child? And my family's an example. Dr. Greg Bonnen went to Angleton Public Schools from kindergarten through high school. Dennis Bonnen went from kindergarten, took a break to go to schools that really benefited his need, and then came back. And the point I wanted to use there is nothing's wrong with our public schools. Anyone who supports school choice doesn't hate public schools. They love the public schools too. The House showed you that yesterday. They put $8 billion into paying teachers more, increasing the basic allotment for our public schools. And they also told families like my parents, it's fine to take Dennis down the street where he gets a better educational opportunity because of his learning challenge. That's what this is really about. It's about not picking winners and losers. It's not about all size one fits all. It's not about saying, you hate me, I love you, you hate me. It's gotta stop. And the House did a phenomenal job of striking that chord yesterday. They showed extreme support of public schools, and they showed support of families needing options.
We are going to ask you about the school finance bill that passed in just a little bit, but we want to stick with the ESA program for now. I do want to ask, the House made some notable changes to the bill that the Senate sent their way and initially passed, so we know those differences are going to have to be hammered out. We also heard just amendment after amendment proposed and be tabled. Some of those, I want to follow up with what you said there. A lot of those seem to get at the fact that the concern that parents who do want to take advantage of this program, the money may not be enough to bridge that gap, to get their student into the private school of their choice for their child's specific need. And we saw a lot of those amendments end up tabled. So what do you do with that? What do you make of that?
Well, let's first point out, and I want to be clear, these are good people representing, and I mean no offense to them, those amendments were by Democrat members who did not want to vote for the bill and do not like the policy. So they were a little bit trying to make a point and maybe not trying to make policy, but they're sincere in their effort. I don't want to be disrespectful of that. One of the things the House did is bring that dollar way up on those who are like me and like my son, who have special needs of learning disability, of attention deficit or what have you. What'd you ask me? I'm kidding. So, you know, they brought that number up in the House. And so I think a lot of those amendments were simply, as we do all the time in the House, it was an effort to say, you say you're doing something good, you're not doing good enough, and oh, by the way, I don't like what you're doing, but I'm going to point out the flaws in what you are doing. I think the House brought that up. They also changed the percentages of where these dollars, the $1 billion allocated, is going to go. They brought that money to a higher threshold, being directed first priority to our learning challenged people like me. They also made sure that those on the higher end are least benefited by this and will see the least benefit and are limited in the benefit that could even be received, and they are the last priority to ever receive those dollars. So I think they actually created a well-crafted, balanced bill. And look, Mark Strom will tell you, if the Democrats didn't show up yesterday and do exactly what they did, which was offer amendment after amendment, poke holes in the policy where they believed they could, and fight that fight, it would have been shame on them. I think both sides, and I hate saying sides, did a great job of representing their positions and the people that sent them to Austin to be heard.
So, two things. One, I generally agree with all of that, except that there was the amendment to put the whole question to the voters. I would have liked to see that amendment pass. I actually, as somebody who is skeptical of the momentousness of this legislation, still think it's created enough controversy. The people of Texas are concerned enough about it that it would have been nice to put it to them. Of course, there's a debate about if this, then what shouldn't go before the voters. It's pretty clear. We've had this show, we do this show once a week. I would say 80% of the shows we've talked about this issue.
very issue, yeah.
So I think this was one that would have been nice to have the voters weigh in, especially given the distorted political process that elevated this issue to be the legislative priority that it has become. I guess the second thing I would say is, I love Dennis's story. I've got two daughters with dyslexia. When Dennis was speaker in 2019, the state put a bunch of money into the public schools to help dyslexic kids. I am very skeptical of the claim about vouchers, and despite what I said about it not being the apocalypse, I would have voted against it. And one of the reasons is I'm very skeptical of this claim that all of a sudden private schools are going to become the primary place where kids with special needs get their education. When our kids were diagnosed with dyslexia, they were in private school. We removed them to the public school where they could get better support. In general, it is private schools don't have to take you. Public schools do. And because of that, public schools have developed robust systems for taking care of the special needs of kids who private schools do not want.
Let's be clear about this, though. There's a phenomenal, I'm drawing a blank on it, but there's a phenomenal private school here in Austin that caters to dyslexic and learning disabled students.
And it's $25,000 a year, not
I get
$10,000
it,
a year.
but there's no, but that $10,000, $12,000 could be the gap between one family's child being able to go to that school and not go to that school. And to the point is, no one's losing if that child is able to now go do that. I think we agree on that. This whole, it's an upheaval and it's awful and you hate me or I hate you. No, this is about being fairly reasonable. I think what's happened here is pretty reasonable.
We have about a minute left here. I do want to quickly ask, we want to note that separately the House voted nearly unanimously to send about $8 billion into the state's public school education. Mark, I want to ask you first quickly here, does that ease any of the concerns about the impact that the ESA program would have on Texas public schools, knowing it's getting this infusion of cash, or no?
Yeah, it was smart to tie those two things together. Yes, it should ease some of the concern. It is zero sum. I mean, any money you spend on private education could otherwise have been spent on public education, but it's a lot easier to digest that zero sum trade-off when the overall pie is getting larger. That is ways to desegregate our schools. We are segregated socioeconomically so that wealthy kids go to public schools with wealthy kids and poor kids go to schools with poor kids. We have a very successful public school system for wealthy kids, and we have not figured out how to make sure that poor kids get an educational opportunity that levels the playing field for them. That's a systemic failure, and it's the most important thing the public school should do.
I think school choice actually helps solve that problem. My boys went to a private school for several years, and in that private school, you had a greater socioeconomic diversity than I think you would have had in the public school.
We're going to find out.
All right. Well, we will leave our conversation there. But Dennis Bond and Mark Strama, thank you both for so much for coming in and sharing this perspective. We'll have you back next week to talk about a whole lot more.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We'll send you to break as well, and we'll see you back after this.